Have you ever heard this expression from people who are retired that I've never been more busy than when I've been retired? Well, I used to hear that from retired people before I retired. And, I kind of thought, yeah, is this true or not? I can't see how it could be because I was a high school English teacher. I was busy all the time. A teacher's life is a busy, busy life in class and outside of class, which is something a lot of people don't really see if they're not in the profession. But when it comes to retirement, you can handle it in one of two ways. You can maintain a busy schedule, or you can sit in front of a television set and wait to die. And you want to know, unfortunately, a lot of people who come from professions where they were busy all the time and didn't take the time to cultivate personal interests and hobbies, they lived for their job. That's exactly what happens to them. They just shut down and eventually shut off completely. Well, I'm one of those kind of people that did not want to do that. I was looking forward to my retirement. And has it been great? Yes, absolutely. And the reason I'm bringing this up today is because there are people who say to me, "What is it that, how is it that you get so many quilts done so fast? And you seem like you're mass producing quilts." And that's because I have the time to do that. And it's also a hobby that I have cultivated and it keeps me very interested. And I think that's the secret to a happy retirement. Cultivating your interests before you retire so you can make the transition from a life where you're working at somebody under somebody else's schedule and rules, and you now have the time to manage for yourself. Now, there is a transition when you go from the world of work to the world of retirement, and you must be prepared for this transition. It took me 2 years to transition. I have been now retired almost 10 years, and the time has flown by very fast. But those first 2 years, I was at a loss as to what to do with my time. Now, I already said that I had cultivated my personal interests and my hobbies, and that the time when I retired, I was still doing paper crafting. I wasn't into quilting yet. That hadn't entered into my field of reality. Um, so I had all those kind of projects to do. But I wanted something more because Walter wasn't retired yet. So he was busy at that point in time. He was going to work every day. And then a little later on, he started to work from home. And so that was sort of his transition from, working life into retired life. But for the first couple of years, I was home alone all day. So what was I going to do with myself? I needed to see people. Now, it's ironic that I say that now because given the last 2 years of COVID, how often have we been able to see people? Except via Zoom. So, in a sense, I suppose those first 2 years were sort of training for COVID, but I didn't know it at the time. But I'm digressing again. So, I went out looking for something to do. Now everybody says when you retire, oh, you should volunteer. You have time now to volunteer. Give back to the community, all that kind of stuff. So I decided to look for volunteer opportunities. I found several. Hated it. Absolutely hated them for it. It was eating into my time. A lot of times when you volunteer for an organization, they see you as free labor and they'll give you all the shit jobs to do as well. Um, you know, Volunteering is not as glorious as sometimes it's made out to be in the media. I mean, sure, great. There's nothing wrong with volunteering, and if that's your thing, and you're giving back to your community for whatever reason you have for it, sure, by all means, of course, do it. But I discovered for myself it wasn't that great. In fact, I volunteered at an art gallery for a while as a docent, as an educator. Well, that was kind of up my alley, right? Having been a teacher. However, I was basically taking, well, most of my tours of the art gallery were for little kids, elementary school children. I was a high school teacher on purpose. I'm not fond of little children. Although I have to admit, it was kind of fun when I was doing it with these kids. I probably would have still been doing that right now. Of course, forget about COVID for a minute. If it hadn't been for the fact that they restructured in the museum and they got rid of all the docets. They'd only had them for 50 years and they just got rid of us, locked us out. That was it. And game over. Thanks very much. Goodbye. Okay. I guess they have a new philosophy as to how to deal with that kind of thing. So that opportunity went down the tubes. Now, I also decided to take some courses, and I joined my local retirement center. And they ran courses in genealogy because at that point in time I was into genealogy. And I went to a couple of those courses, and those were kind of interesting. But the genealogy thing kind of died with me because I hit too many brick walls. And yeah, it was to the point where I'd gone as far as I figured I could. And that was the end of that. I did do a little bit of volunteer work for the community center as well, for the seniors community center. They asked me to teach a course in security for seniors on the internet. So I put a whole thing together and did that for a few times. And that was a thankless job. That really was. I even did some paper crafting as well. I supplied everything because they didn't have any money. So that I kind of looked at it as my contribution to the community center. But to be honest, I didn't really enjoy it. So I was trying to find my way around. Now I got a job. Yes, a part-time job at the local scrapbooking store. And that was okay. And I did that for a couple of years. But I found it was eating into my personal time, although I had fairly flexible hours. But, you know, they expected me to also teach classes and things like that. And it became almost like a full-time job. So I quit. That. And then I discovered quilting. And at the same time, I was moving into the world of YouTube and making YouTube videos. So that's part of my hobbies as well. And that keeps me really busy. But the world of quilting really fills my days, not just in terms of making quilts and doing all that kind of stuff or machine embroidery, but also in terms of taking classes, doing online classes, retreats, things like that. So I'm always very, very busy. We also like to travel. Now, of course, for the last 2 years, we haven't been able to travel because of COVID. But I'm so glad that we did a lot of that. And especially once Walter retired as well, we could go off season, as they say. And, you know, prices are a little cheaper and less crowds and that kind of thing. So that keeps us busy too. I was busy with my mother as well, because as you know, my mother was in a nursing home. And so I was kind of looking after all of her affairs and things like that. Now that my mother is gone, that was more of a, well, it was my duty as her son to look after my mother. And I don't resent that. Oh, there were days when I kind of did, but, you know, overall, no. And that kept me busy as well, looking after all of that. Well, of course, that's over with now. But I guess the whole thing I'm coming back to is retirement is wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. Now, I am a lucky person. I was in a profession, and in my profession, I do have a pension, which is a fairly decent pension. I also plan financially for my retirement as well. So, you know, I am not suffering from lack of funds. Some people go into retirement and have nothing. And I feel sorry for those people. You have to plan for retirement. Both you have to plan for what you're going to do, and you have to plan financially for it as well. Because there's nothing worse than being retired and having to figure out where your income's going to come from as well. Thankfully, as I said, that is not something I have to worry about. So overall, retirement is very, very enjoyable. And that's how I get so many quilts done, because I'm constantly working at things. I'm the kind of person that needs to be busy. And I need challenges. And I find them. I find them every day. Because the one thing about retirement is you got to keep this going, the brain. And I have a question I ask myself all the time. What if? What if I was to do this? What if I was to explore that? And not poo-pie. And not give up before you even try. push myself to learn new things, um, to do new things all the time. And it just keeps life so interesting. How how busy am I? Constant. Do I love being busy all the time? Yes. It keeps me going. Because if you're not busy all the time, if you're not doing anything, what's the alternative?